So the next person that we'll talk about is Alexandra Kollontai, who of the five that we were going to talk about tonight, she was the one I was the most familiar with before reading this book. So Kollontai is probably one of the most famous political figures of the early Soviet era.
Okay.
She was very involved in the beginnings of the early the Bolshevik Revolution and in the early Soviet government under Lenin, and she would continue that influence well into the 1940s and 50s when she became a diplomat. But she is somebody whose story is a little bit different than Pavlyuchenko. So, Pavlyuchenko grows up more in a working class family. Kollontai is not. She grows up in more of a wealthy, sort of liberal sort of oriented family in when she's born, I believe in 1872,
Okay.
and so she comes from what Godsey describes as a liberal aristocratic family. And so she was exposed to politics early on through her father, who was sent to the Balkans to help write a constitution for the Bulgarian state,
Okay.
which had been newly liberated from the Ottoman Empire in 1878. She went with him. So she's like this young person learning from another political figure, being her father. And so she's very influenced by a couple of key works of socialist theory. Maybe these are two books we can cover on the show later on in other episodes, but one of them is August Bebel's book, Woman and Socialism.
Okay.
And the other book is, and probably the more famous book, is Friedrich Engels' book, The Origin of Family, Private Property, and the State.
Okay.
And so she sort of learns about how material conditions often set the parameters of gender norms.
Mm-hmm.
And so she kind of learns a little bit about that. And so she becomes, kind of radicalized by this, and it sort of makes her a communist, right? And so she writes her own pamphlet called The Social Basis of the Woman Question in 1909. And I'm going to just read a quote from it because I think it's awesome. I won't do many readings tonight, but this one's good.
Okay.
Where she writes, "On the ruins of the former family, we shall soon behold rising a new form, which will involve altogether different relations between men and women, and which will be a union of affection and comradeship, a union of two equal persons of the communist society, both of them free, both of them independent, both of them workers. No more domestic servitude for women, no more inequality within the family, no more fear on the part of the woman to remain without support or aid with the little ones in her arms if her husband should desert her. The woman in the communist city no longer depends on her husband, but on her own work. It is not her husband, but her robust arms which will support her." So there's a lot there to kind of unpack in her own sort of conceptions of gender politics and sexuality. So right away, when I'm reading this passage, it reminds me of when we talked about Bertrand Russell's book, in Praise of Idleness, where he's talking about sort of the future social society where we can set up places where, children can have daycare centers and good health care, and the parents can work and then spend like their most quality time with their children and have an equal part in the family.
Yeah.
She's kind of saying the same thing around the same time,
Right.
albeit in a little bit more radical way.